Dan Ige versus Patricio Pitbull. Not the most exciting fight on the main card, but it was interesting because Pitbull came in this fight as a underdog, and again, you had to think that Ige was going to try to put it on him early, right? We know Ige carries heavy hands, and honestly, at featherweight, he carries some of the biggest hands in the featherweight division. Guy that has that rare one-punch knockout power. But he ran into a brick wall with Pitbull. In that first round, not a whole lot going on. Both guys kind of feeling each other out, and then just kind of peppering each other with some jabs and some kicks. And really what kind of swung that round was just Pitbull's wrestling, right? And I've said this before, guys. When you guys got or when we got two fighters that are kind of feeling each other out and just kind of peppering each other with jabs, not a whole lot here, back and forth, right? Very even on the feet. Then one guy starts to implement a couple takedowns, even if they don't do anything with it. That's going to swing the round in favor of the guy that took him down. And round one definitely was swung to Pitbull because of that, right? Then we get into round two. Pitbull really starts to put it on him, starts landing some damage. I think he caught him with the straight going in, right? And then had him up against the fence. Really was working some good striking against the fence, and really it looked like for a minute he was going to get him out of there. But Ige is tough as can be. He recovered, but again, I talked about this in my previous fight. Another fighter under Eric Nixit that seemed to have a hard time getting it going, right? Now I'm not going to necessarily co-sign, completely that comment that was said. In the MMA Guru live chat, so somebody did. Then Guru seemed to really like, oh man, I didn't think about that. These guys under Eric Nixon have a hard time getting it going, and they want to try to turn it on later rounds when it's too late. They approach it like it's a sparring session, But there is something to that. Is that coincidence? Is that the coaching thing? Who knows? But you had to think that Ige could have done more, right? It seemed to be like he was holding back quite a bit. Didn't really seem to want to put it on him. I don't know if. It could have been like the threat of the takedown. And I will say that, guys, the threat of the takedown changes everything. And, Pitbull is a guy, if you haven't followed his career, very well-rounded guy. He's a guy that has good wrestling, really good jiu-jitsu, good striking, good takedown defense, right? He's a pretty complete fighter. It's just now going into the UFC at, I think, 37 now. It's not the ideal time for him to be making his UFC career push, so to say. But, and then Ige tried to turn it on in that third round. I think caught him with like a kick / knee. Didn't credit him with a knockdown. I think he fell to a knee maybe, but, had him hurt and opportunity there. But, again, when you're down two rounds, you're going to have to pull a rabbit out of your hat. And while Ige is definitely capable of that, it was just, and against a guy like Pitbull, and guys, Pitbull's a guy, he does not care necessarily about putting on a show. He's a guy that will win whatever that looks like. He's not a guy that's going to be focused on, putting on a good show, putting himself in too much harm's way. He's a guy that's going to be patient, wait for his opportunities. We saw that. Not a whole lot of risk in the first round, but in the second round, really went forward a little bit more, really put it on Ige. Good win for Pitbull. He's going to steal Ige's ranking. I don't think this necessarily drops Ige out of the rankings, but not a great showing from Ige. Again, that first round, guys. Let's think about this for a second. So as close as that first round was, okay, not a whole lot happened, right? Pitbull swung that round in his favor with just some basic wrestling, right? Got a body lock from back position, took him down. Ige got back up, reestablished position, body lock from the back, took him down again. Had some control time, swung the round in his favor. That being said, guys, if Ige lands one nasty combination, one big shot, one where, one moment, right? That probably swings around in his favor. And Ige's capable of that. Just kind of biting down on his mouthpiece and just, saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. I just got to crack him once, maybe have him fall to his knee. It doesn't even have to be a knockdown. He does that one time in that first round. We're looking at a 1-to-1 contest going into the third round. The fight's totally different. I did kind of think that Ige kind of let this one slip away from him. But, credit to Pitbull. He was patient. He used all his tricks, all his tools. Didn't really need to mix in the jiu-jitsu too much, but mixed in the wrestling when he needed to, just enough to swing the round in his favor. patient and implemented his striking, and knew exactly when to pour it on him. And he did what he did. Ige tried to recover in that third round, just couldn't get it done. So, where does Ige go from here? He's just going to be one of these guys where you're just going to put him in fun fights, but let's give him some good matchups, right? Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what that looks like right now, but he's going to continue to be involved in meaningful fights. This is Pitbull's first win in the UFC. I think it's good that he kind of got that one under his belt. He's going to continue to try to climb the rankings. We'll see if he can do it. I think at 37, the odds aren't in his favor of doing that. I mean, he might hit a ceiling, and Ige might be the ceiling. We'll have to wait and see. But he's a guy though that he's going to give everyone a tough fight. Even in the fight with Yair Rodriguez, Yair didn't really steamroll him necessarily. I mean, it was a clear victory for Yair, but it was he had him in some concerning moments from time to time, right? Which that will happen with Yair, because Yair's not, he's the guy that will put himself in harm's way. But Pitbull moves on. We'll see where they book him with next. He's going to try to continue to climb those rankings. So Ige, let's keep putting him in some bangers, right? Guys that are going to mix it up with him. Okay. So moving on. After that fight, we had, this sure was an interesting one, Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez. Again, another underdog that came to fight, man. And Kevin Holland really, this was I'm just going to say it, guys, and I try not to be too overly critical on the fighters, because I think that is a lot going on. I mean, these guys, some of us, we get behind these cameras and, behind the computers and the phones, and, we're just, talk pretty disrespectful sometimes about some of these fighters, and so, but let's be honest, there's not many of us that could do what these guys do, and especially on that level, right? And these guys get in there and go to war for our entertainment, right? So we can have these conversations, we can do this, we can make content, so we can, get on social media and everything, have something to talk about and enjoy. And so, I tried to be too critical with these guys, but man, if there was a lock, if you felt like there was you had to pick one fight, like a lock on the card, right? I mean, you had to think that Kevin Holland was a lock to beat D-Rod. I mean, going this speed advantage, youth advantage, definitely athletic advantage, huge jiu-jitsu advantage, right? Guys, a black belt under Travis Lutter. I've said that before in the previous fights. He is a guy that when he comes in at his best, he can give anybody problems. And you had to think that D-Rod, coming in, I think on a bit of a, well, he had strung together some good wins against Santiago Ponzinibbio and Alex Morono. Both had those wins aged well? Not necessarily, but before that he was coming off a 2-fight losing streak, Gastelum and Machado, 3 fights, and Neil Magny. Now he's rebounded with 3 wins consecutively. This is definitely one of his biggest wins though, man. But again, we get these different versions of Kevin Holland, and I was so frustrated watching this fight for him, right? Because he gets in there, and it's one of these fights where he starts wanting to dap guys up and starts, clowning around a little bit, and, no killer instinct, no sense of urgency, right? And he gets in there, and again, kind of like he's in a sparring match. And then what does D-Rod do? He cracks him bad. Cracks him bad in that second round, gets credited with 2 knockdowns, has a really solid first round, so puts Kevin behind the gun already in that third round. And the crowd and people watching at home had to just be shocked, like, man, like what is this, right? Because we just saw Kevin Holland against Vicente Luque look like an absolute killer, right? And then he just completely lays an egg against D-Rod. But I'm not going to take that away from D-Rod because he came to fight. Kevin tried to put it on him in that third round. It's funny. But I noticed that D-Rod had the tat on the dome, the man, the Jesus piece on the dome, man, that is sure gnarly, right? And I kept thinking like, man, when Kevin was trying to crack him and he was landing some good shots, and you see D-Rod kind of shell up, it was almost like he's saying, hey, Jesus, take the wheel, right? You're not knocking the Jesus piece on the dome out tonight, right? But and of course I'm joking, but. D-Rod with do we have new mythical fighter unlocked, right? D-Rod with the Jesus piece on the dome. I'm not sure how long he's had that, but I don't remember him having that before. But no, man, great fight from D-Rod. Again, those 2 knockdowns in the second round, nearly finished him. He had him hurt, bad. And then, what stood out to me though the most in this fight was even though Holland was behind the gun in that third round, he had an opportunity in that third round to finish and submit him. He got, I think it might have been like a body triangle, or he had one of the hooks in from D-Rod's back, and he got a little high, right, and he started falling off to the side. But D-Rod, if memory serves, he was a little hurt and he was tired, and all Kevin had to do. I remember watching that, thinking like, okay, D-Rod's not going anywhere, right? He's shelling up, he's putting up some defensive measures, but not a ton, right? He's really just trying to buy time at that point. Kevin just had to take a moment, breathe, reestablish position from the back, because he was trying to work that choke, but he's falling off the side. But D-Rod's so gassed and tired and a little beat up at that point, he should have just taken a moment to just reestablish position. He probably could have got that choke if he would have reestablished position, because it's not like D-Rod was trying to do any kind of rolls or really like a burst stand up to escape that position. It was kind of there for the taking, in my opinion. And when he watches that back, he's got to be kicking himself, because because really literally D-Rod just there shelled up, and if Kevin just takes a moment, just kind of cinches himself back over, reestablishes position on a guy that's pretty stationary, probably could have stolen that victory away from him. But you know what though? I'm not taking that away from D-Rod, because he put it on him early, those first 2 rounds, and put Kevin behind the gun. And this is what Kevin does sometimes. He gets behind and he panics and he does things. It's like, dude, like, what are you doing, right? A guy with all the talent in the world. But D-Rod on to bigger and better things. And we'll see what Kevin Holland does. In my previous video after one of my previous videos after the Vicente Luque fight, I was just really impressed, and I just kept saying, oh man, this is great. He's found his home at 170. He's maybe even potentially got a title run. But the guy just has such a hard time being consistent. I don't know if it's a mindset thing. You had to think that this was a very winnable fight for him. But D-Rod with the Jesus piece on the dome gets it done. Very impressive. So we move on to the co-main event, guys. Kopylov versus Costa. Man, did Paulo Costa sure need this one, right? And on paper, you really had to think that, just from experience, from name value, you had to think that Costa had the edge, in a sense that he's been in fights with better competition than Costa. A lot of times come out on the losing end, but this was one of the best versions of Paulo Costa I've ever seen. Clearly he trained appropriately for this fight. One of the things that stood out to me the most in this fight was the distribution of damage from Paulo Costa, which I loved. And let me look at the significant strike numbers here. So total, Paulo Costa, significant strikes to the head, 34, strikes to the body, 41, strikes to the leg, a perfect 24 of 24. He broke him down from top to bottom. And I think it was was it the first round I think it was in that first round where he knocked him down, caught him with the straight, and then Kopylov shot for like a pretty like desperation single leg, right? And Paulo Costa, I've seen him before when he was coming up, when he'll hurt guys and they'll shoot for these desperation single legs, and he'll just start whipping those hammer fists, right? He was doing that. Kopylov got up, and I was just waiting because there was a moment where as Kopylov was coming up, Costa had an opportunity in when he was in a close distance to really just whip an elbow in there. He was right there as Kopylov was kind of going back to the fence for the taking, and I thought he probably could have finished him. But this was a really, really strong performance from Costa. Again, I think, did Costa come in as an underdog on this one? I think he might have. But, he has had a very hard time. Another guy, hard time stringing together some, consistent wins. But he showed in this one that he can be technical, that he can pour it on when he needs to. And that he's not just this brawler, right? This kind of like dumb kind of brawler with heavy hands, right? And this was, and that's it. It was indicative of that because of his distribution, right? He didn't go head hunting, right? He didn't just try to constantly work the body or the legs. Like it was a equal distribution of damage, right? And Costa's leg kicks and kicks to the body, they were pretty nasty, and he had Kopylov in trouble, pretty early, right? And Kopylov's a guy that's usually on his front foot, pushing forward, but he had him on the back foot a lot of that fight. And I don't think at any point Costa was concerned of anything that Kopylov had for him. I did not think that at any point he felt the threat of really being knocked out or being hurt, but showed patience. He's pushing for a fight now with Khamzat Chimaev. He thinks that, he said in previous interviews, he thinks that the champion Dricus du Plessis is going to beat him. I don't know if Khamzat loses, if they even, they book that fight. Hey, who knows? They might. But we got to wait and see how that fight plays out first. But great win for Costa. Definitely keeps his name relevant and maintains his ranking, which is a good thing. He's a guy that if he continues to approach the fights healthy, approach it with a good mindset, a good game plan, and like he previously said, he felt like he was very reserved in his previous fights, didn't pour it on when he needed to. I think he's going to find much more success. Does he have a title run in him? Probably not. He had his opportunity against Adesanya back in, what was that, I think 2020. Came up very short. I mean, we've seen it. Unfortunately, I don't think that was the best he had to offer. I don't think that that fight was a good representation of his abilities. But, Adesanya got in his head. He's in there. When Costa starts getting in there and doing all this, hands behind the back and this, like, it's not a good sign. And I could tell that he was off his game very early into that fight. And Adesanya took advantage, finished him early. But that might have been his only opportunity because, guys, I mean, the whole landscape of the middleweight division looks totally different now than it did back in 2020. I mean, we've got some killers at middleweight now that weren't even on anyone's radar back in 2020. And so it's much more competitive than it was. So if he is going to make a title run, that's a tall order. But the time is now for him at 34. So we'll see what he does. Let's see. He needs to continue to climb those ranks. So we'll see who they give him next. Hats off to Paulo Costa, though. Great performance.